I grew up watching my dad play Go. Go is a 2,500-year-old board game played by 40 million people daily. Sometimes it takes hours to finish one round. I still remember the day when my mom threw out my dad's Go stones, totally exasperated. In March of 2016, more than 200 million people around the world watched a historic Go game between some unusual participants. One was the second highest ranking world champion of Go, Lee Sedol from South Korea, and the other was artificial intelligence, or AI, developed by Google DeepMind called AlphaGo. After 5 days of games, Lee Sedol lost 1-4, which was a total surprise. I was born in a rural, bucolic farm town in Korea, and grew up catching salamanders in this stream. One spring day during my sophomore year in high school, I sat down with my parents to decide whether I was taking the liberal arts or math and science track. My parents gave me a blank stare and said, "Why are you trying to go to college?" Because the conventional wisdom in rural Korea back then was that girls didn't go to college. They got married and started to have a family. They said, "If we send you to college, we won't even get a bus ride out of you because you'll get married and become a stranger to us. But we will get an airplane ride out of your brothers." That day, I decided I'd go to college with or without their help. I was able to graduate with a bachelor's degree in accounting from BYU with honors and no student loans. That happens to be the accomplishment that I'm most proud of in my life so far. When I got my job after college and bought a house, I flew out my mom. She did get an airplane ride out of me after all. And when she saw how I was living, she said with tears in her eyes, "You are a dragon born in a stream. I thought you were a salamander. Dragons belong in the ocean, not in the humble stream where you were born." So the question here today is, how do you go from a salamander to a dragon? That radically changes the conventional wisdom and causes everyone to play by the rules that you define. What are the principles of radical innovation? The number of possible board configurations in Go is more than the number of atoms in the universe. The number of possible moves in a given turn in Go is 250, whereas it's 35 in chess. As I watched the game, I became curious about how AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol. My investigations uncovered several principles behind its victory, and I was fascinated to see that these were the same principles some companies use to spawn radical innovation and radically change how the game is played in their industry. I'd like to share 5 of those principles with you today. First, self-organization. Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, has talked about how Netflix lets its employees self-organize. Netflix management thought, "There's no clothing policy at Netflix, but nobody comes to work naked," because the employees know the right thing to do. Their vacation policy is not to have a vacation policy. There is no expense policy at Netflix, nor a department to ensure compliance to an expense policy. The employees decide how many vacation days they take and what expenses get reimbursed. That's just a small example of how Netflix promotes self-organization. My global leadership research that was published on Harvard Business Review found that out of the 74 attributes tested, number 2 is allowing self-organization. That was the number 2 most important attribute among the 74 attributes tested when evaluating bosses. We all have innate need to be self-directed. 2, simple rules. AlphaGo has 2 sets of simple rules. One set of rules, called policy networks, evaluates board positions and reduces the breadth of the search. Another set of rules, called value networks, evaluates the probability of winning in a given position and reduces the depth of the search. It has to simplify because trying to figure out every possible move is just not practical. Google's simple rule to decide priorities: focus on the user, and all else will follow. What about ethics? Don't be evil. How about how to allocate corporate funds? Spend 70% on existing products, 20% on emerging products, and 10% on moonshot projects. As a result of implementing these simple rules and other principles of radical innovation, Google has been ranked among the top 3 most innovative companies for 10 years in a row as compiled by Boston Consulting Group. Third, trial and error. AlphaGo had to lose many times to improve its win rate. A video game company, Electronic Arts, sold more than 1 million copies of SimCity 5 in the first 2 weeks of its launch. They were surprised to find that the variation with no promotional offer whatsoever drove 43% more purchases because their loyal customers just wanted to buy the game and no extra incentive was necessary. Success comes from learning, and learning requires failures, which means success requires failures for both AI and organizations. Organizations will be much better served by measuring learning and tracking pattern recognition skills and the false positive and false negative rates in the decisions they make instead of quarterly earnings if they want to succeed in the long term. 4 is general intelligence. Jonathan Rosenberg and Eric Schmidt wrote in their book, How Google Works, favoring specialization over intelligence is wrong, especially in high tech. A specialist brings an inherent bias towards solving problems, but a generalist doesn't have such a bias and can survey a wide range of solutions and gravitate towards the best one. I had a client a few years ago who was very focused on developing a logistics solution, and they spent years perfecting the solution. Imagine what their response was when they found out Amazon is coming out with a solution to deliver products using drones, completely obliterating their business model. They could not lift their eyes off of what they're very good at, what their expertise is, and have a broad, open mind to survey the environment and come up with the best possible solution. 5, finally, it's a diversity of input. A Canadian mining company, Goldcorp, offered in March of 2010 $600,000 of prize money in a contest for the participants to find gold in their mine in Ontario. They made 400 megabytes of geological data available to all participants who identified 110 targets, of which 50% were new and 80% were successful. These efforts led to $3 billion of gold being mined. As a result, their company valuation went up from $100 million to $9 billion. Tapping into collective intelligence is really powerful. With quantity, quality is achieved. What is the price of practicing these quantum leadership skills then? What happens? Where will your company be in 8 years? And how do you get there? How you get there is through practicing these quantum leadership skills. When you practice those things, you can radically redefine the rules of the game in the industry, and you can be a dragon in the ocean.
Please give it up for Sunnie for joining us.